All right, let's get started. This is your critical briefing on the emerging liability risks we're all facing as we head into 2026. We're not just going to look at surface-level trends today. We're going to analyze the deep forces and the compounding financial exposures that are set to impact every single commercial line. So let's dive right in.
Let me be clear. What we're covering today is designed for strategic decision-making at the highest level. It's easy to look at the commercial insurance market and think things are stable. But that, frankly, is a dangerous illusion. Just beneath that calm exterior, we are seeing unprecedented volatility and a really startling escalation in the severity of key risks.
So, where do we start? Well, first we have to examine the persistent market pressures. I want you to think of these as the tectonic plates of the risk world. They're these foundational forces that aren't just shaping our current environment, they are creating some really unprecedented challenges for how we calculate and manage risk going forward.
Okay, so you see these 5 forces on the screen, but it's crucial to understand they're not acting in isolation. Not at all. They're creating a perfect storm. We've got climate events completely rewriting our catastrophe models. At the same time, inflation is driving up the cost of every single claim, from construction to medical care. Meanwhile, geopolitical instability is wrecking supply chains, and the rapid adoption of AI is introducing a whole new class of operational risks we're just beginning to understand. And to top it all off, a wave of new regulations is expanding corporate liability in ways we've never seen before. The result? A new, much higher baseline of claim severity across the board.
Okay, so that's the big picture. Now let's really drill down into the specific threats that are compounding this whole problem. And these aren't just individual risks we can check off a list. Think of them more like a chain reaction of interlocking factors that are amplifying both the financial and the operational damage.
Look, if there's one single accelerator of liability pressure right now, it is the litigation environment. And more specifically, we're talking about the alarming rise of what are now being called nuclear verdicts.
Yeah, that's right. We're talking about jury awards hitting $10 million or more. And these are not just one-off freak events anymore. They're becoming disturbingly common, especially in sectors like hospitality, retail, and real estate. But the real damage, the real financial drag, goes way beyond that initial verdict. These awards create a ripple effect, driving up insurance costs and restricting coverage for everyone, even for companies with perfect safety records.
And this quote from BFSL really hits the nail on the head. You see, these massive verdicts are really just a symptom of something bigger, a trend we call social inflation. Basically, it's a shift in societal attitudes, a growing distrust of corporations that's leading juries to award these astronomical sums. And that puts immense pressure on insurance carriers, forcing them to reduce the amount of coverage they're willing to offer. As a result, companies now have to piece together coverage from multiple insurers, which, you can imagine, is not only more expensive, but an absolute nightmare to manage.
All right, let's pivot now and talk technology. Because artificial intelligence, well, it's not just a defensive tool anymore. It's being actively weaponized. We are now seeing AI-powered attacks with a level of sophistication we've never seen before. And they're targeting both the operational integrity and the financial stability of organizations.
And I want to be very clear, these aren't some far-off theoretical threats. This is happening right now. We're talking about deepfakes being used to authorize massive fraudulent transactions, voice cloning to completely bypass security protocols, and AI-powered phishing campaigns that are so personalized, so sophisticated, they're almost impossible for even trained employees to spot. And it's not just about external attacks. The risk of an internal algorithmic failure is creating an entirely new category of liability that insurers are, frankly, scrambling to understand.
And make no mistake, these are not random attacks. They're not just bad luck. Just look at this data from S&P Global. A staggering 75% of cyber incidents are targeted. They are deliberate. So what does that mean for you? It means basic cyber hygiene, while still important, is just not going to cut it anymore. To even be considered for decent insurance coverage today, you need a rock-solid, tested incident response plan and a really sophisticated way to manage the risk coming from all your vendors.
So what happens when you throw all of these converging threats into a blender? Well, you get what we in the industry call actuarial volatility. And in plain English, that just means the past is no longer a reliable predictor of the future. All of our traditional models for calculating risk, they're starting to break down. So in this next section, we're going to look at the hidden factors creating this volatility and what amounts to a significant, unseen financial drag on the entire system.
So this diagram here, it really lays out the modern framework for managing risk. It's a sequence, a logical progression. First, you have your defenses, your walls. Then you have your resilience plan, what you do when those walls are inevitably breached. And only then, as the absolute final backstop, do you have insurance to cover the financial losses you just couldn't prevent. And this is where this critical concept of residual risk comes into play. It's exactly what it sounds like. The financial risk that's left over, even after you've done everything right with your defenses and your resilience planning. And honestly, the single biggest challenge we face today is figuring out how to accurately quantify that residual risk.
But here's the fundamental problem. You see it right here on the slide. There is an information gap, and it is a big one. An insurer writes a policy based on a snapshot in time, the information they have on that day. What they can't do is perfectly monitor what the insured party is doing day in and day out to actually manage their risk, and that creates a critical blind spot.
And that blind spot, that information gap, leads directly to a classic economic problem we call moral hazard. It's simple, really. When a company knows it's insured, it might, consciously or not, get a little less careful about managing its own risk. This behavior creates that unseen financial drag on the system, because the actual risk is now much higher than what was originally priced into the policy.
So what's the answer here? Let me be blunt. The old model of just buying an insurance policy and crossing your fingers is completely obsolete. It's done. The new reality, the new mandate, is that you have to be proactive about managing your risk and building a truly resilient organization.
Let's just put these two models side by side. It's a stark contrast. The old way was reactive. You'd buy a standard policy and then file a claim after something bad happened. The new mandate is all about being proactive. It's a continuous, strategic process of identifying and mitigating risks before they become a catastrophic problem. And this isn't a choice, it's a necessity in today's market.
And this new approach, this new mandate, is driving a whole new generation of insurance products that we call hyper-personalized offerings. So forget one-size-fits-all policies. We're now talking about custom-built, tailored solutions designed specifically for the unique and complex risks that modern companies are facing today.
So what do these new solutions actually look like? Well, they generally fall into three buckets. First, you've got captive insurance, where a company essentially creates its own insurance company. This gives them way more control and can save a lot of money long-term. Then there are parametric solutions, which are really fascinating. They don't pay based on a loss. They pay out automatically when a specific trigger is hit, like a hurricane reaching a certain wind speed. And finally, you have blended programs that mix and match different elements, traditional, parametric, and captive, to create the perfect, most cost-effective solution. So the bottom line is this, and this quote says it all. Being resilient is no longer a nice-to-have. It is a must-have. It's a prerequisite. Insurance underwriters are now scrutinizing a company's resilience as a key factor in their decision-making. If you can't demonstrate that you have strong controls, transparent reporting, and a real strategic approach to risk management, you are going to find it incredibly difficult, maybe even impossible, to get affordable and adequate coverage.
So I'll leave you with this one final question to take back to your teams. As we look ahead to 2026, is your risk strategy truly centered on building a resilient organization, or are you just going through the motions of renewing your policies? Because the answer to that question will determine not just your financial exposure, but quite possibly your very insurability. That concludes this briefing.